All right, everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining us for another fabulous Power to Fly Chat and Learn event. Happy Friday. I hope y'all are ready to kind of cruise into the weekend. And I'm hoping that this will be a nice way for you guys to kind of cap off your weekend, learn some, or cap off your work week, learn some great stuff from Rachel today. Now, before we dive in, I just want to say hi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. My name's Meg. I am part of Power to Fly's hosting team, and I'm really excited to get to speak with you all today and share some really, really great insights from Rachel. Now, before we dive in, I just want to highlight that participation is key with these events. These are all about you, our community members. We want to make sure that if you took the time out of your day to be here with us live, that you get all of the benefits of this. So you can participate in a couple different ways. You are always welcome to turn your cameras on and share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely. No pressure to be Insta perfect, messy buns, non-traditional workspaces, furry coworkers. All of this is actively encouraged. We just want to meet you where you are. Now, if you have any kind of privacy concerns, you will not show up on the live stream or the recording of today's session as long as you don't come off mute. So if you stay on mute, you don't have to worry about any kind of privacy issues there. If you do want to ask a question, you can always put them into the group chat. It's on you'll find it in the toolbar of Zoom. If you have a question that you want me to ask, but you'd like to remain anonymous, that is totally fine. Just DM it to me. You'll find my name, Meg Alexander, on the dropdown. Now, you are absolutely also encouraged to network with your friends. Keep that chat hopping. Let us know, do you agree with what we're talking about? You maybe have a different lived experience. We would love to hear about it and share. The other thing I want to highlight for you is that since today's session is being recorded, you don't have to worry about taking notes. You don't have to worry if you missed out on, on a resource that somebody talked about. You can always go back and rewatch this recording later. Now, everybody that registered is going to get an email from us next week with a link to where this video is posted when it hits our own Power to Fly website. Now, if Rachel says something today that is just so mind-blowing, you cannot wait to share it with a coworker or a friend or a relative, you don't have to wait until next week. You can always head over to our YouTube channel. I'll share the link for that in the chat in just a moment. But you can head over to our YouTube channel. The recording is posted usually within about 5 to 15 minutes of the end of the live stream. And you can also watch a huge section of our archive of videos on our website, on our YouTube page as well. We also have a ton of great content that we share on all of our social media platforms. We are at Power to Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And you are also welcome to, like I said, follow us on those channels, take photos or video as we go, and share with your social media network. Let people know that you are learning and growing with Power to Fly. We would love to retweet or reshare any posts. You can always tag us, and we would love to share those with the wider community. So please feel free to do that. Now, I'm really excited to introduce you to our speaker today. So Rachel is back and joining us for another fabulous event with her. As soon as I found out Rachel was the speaker today, I could not wait to start today's chat. Now, Rachel is, her early professional experience was at Goldman Sachs. She was in ops and at Bridgewater Associates in HR as well. Now, from there, Rachel was trained as a coach at NYU and became a certified coach through the International Coach Federation. Now, she worked in HR research at Aon Hewitt and attained her technology MBA at NYU Stern. Now, throughout Rachel's career, she has helped hundreds of professionals with career exploration. And for the past 4 years, she has been working on building her own company called Woken. Now, Woken is an online career exploration platform to coach professionals through the process of clarifying their ideal job as well as career path, something that I think a lot of us at one time or another would have very much loved to have help with. So Rachel, welcome back, I should say, to the Power to Fly stage. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we dive into questions?
I don't think so. I mean, this is a very, good intro to my background. Happy to tell you guys more about, what I do, but in essence, the company I've been building for about 4.5 years, we're here to make sure that each and every individual and professional can be very intentional with any and all career decisions. So we've built a lot of digital tools around that, frameworks, tools, you name it, And so really any career challenge, goal, whatever it may be, whatever phase you're in, we're here to help. And so many of those phases can be interlinked. But yeah, today we're going to focus on networking. I'm sure it'll, sort of go in a lot of different directions, but happy to get started on these questions. And I believe if you guys have questions as well, you can share in the chat.
Yes, please feel free to share questions in the chat. If you submitted one and you're not sure if we're going to have time to get to it today, ask it in the chat. If Rachel is talking about something and you'd like to dive deeper, or you would like to expand on a term that you might be unfamiliar with, let us know. I'll be in the chat this entire time. I'll keep my eyes peeled for questions, and we cannot wait to get started. So a lot of the questions that we sent in, a lot of questions that we received had to do with networking. So people wanted to know, like, what are the goals of networking? And I think this is something that's really important to highlight, right? Because I feel like networking as a term, we're probably going to reach that like semantic satiation point where like networking no longer seems like a real word. But like, I feel like it's one of those things that people tell you to do, and it's like, it's good for you, but you don't really know why it's good for your career or what you're supposed to be doing, like, what you're supposed to be getting out of it. So in your opinion, what do you think are the goals of networking?
Yeah, great question. And it's an important place to start, because I think the goal, making your own personal goal clear for networking, right? There's a lot of different ways, but asking yourself what you want out of it or what you need out of it at that moment, depending on where you are and what you're working towards, is the first step. And I'll tell you some examples of what it could be used for. But knowing your own goal in that moment is so important, because I'm sure we'll talk about how to phrase your outreach to people, and making sure your goal is clear to them as well and clear to yourself is also going to just make you more effective in this process, as well as to get out of it what you need, right? So absolutely glad we're starting here. The quickest thing that comes to my mind is learning, right? Like, people always say, like, building relationships. Sure, that's good, that's fine, and that's real. And you do want professional relationships that could benefit you maybe even in 10 years. Like, there's a proactive element of meeting people where you almost can't predict how and where they may help you down the line. That's real, and that's building relationships. I like to think of it like learning, right? But again, it depends what phase you're in. So for example, if you're in career exploration mode, say you're just saying to yourself, I just want to figure out what I want to do next. I want to learn about a few different roles. I want to learn about a few different industries. I might want to consider either a small company or a large company, whatever you're debating, whatever options are on your mind. If you're clarifying your direction, learning, networking can be so useful to learn. And again, we'll have to talk about exactly the right sort of questions to ask and how to make it a useful time if you're going to run an informational call. But learning is so critical. We could take it one step further. If you're pivoting, you already know your direction, and you know you want to make a slight or even a major pivot. Again, learning the reality and the nuances of how people actually break into that pathway. Sometimes there's a few steps, right? They may say, well, people typically start out in this role, and then once internally they move to this team. Or they may say, this is what we look for in someone's portfolio, or this is what's, education or skills or certification is typically required. I like to ask for patterns in these questions. So it's good, you can learn about somebody's unique path, but I like to, leverage their vantage point about what typically happens when people make these pivots. What is the reality of the hiring practices? Who have you hired recently into this role? And, what did they have that stood out? So really getting the patterns, getting the reality, getting the nuances that you can't read in a job posting, right? You can also learn so much about a company culture, which is so important, right? So there's role, there's industry, and there's environment. You can learn about all three of those things, which are all three important buckets to consider. But the culture, that's important to all of us. We want to be around people that we vibe with, that we align with, that the values, you want it to feel good. And we all know what it feels like to not be in that aligned environment. So you can learn so much on an informational call that can help you decide, is this culture a fit for me? Or maybe I shouldn't even bother going after it. You're going to increase the likelihood that you're going to be a fit once you get there if you can objectively learn before you even apply or interview. You can also get a lot of information that you can use in the interview. So if you had informational calls, you can reference certain things and say, I spoke with Tommy and he mentioned to me A, B, C, and D about how this company works. And that really resonated with me because of whatever. If you prove that you actually get how it works on the inside and why that means something to you, that, people want to feel good that you kind of already know you're a fit to an extent and you've done your homework. Also experiential learning, right? So if you're debating a course, a certification, graduate school, doctorate, boot camp, any sort of learning skill development type of a program, talk to somebody who's either in that program or has recently graduated. And by the way, talk to more than one, sometimes asking the same questions to multiple people. It's a beautiful way to get confident with what makes sense for you. And so if you're debating paying money and or spending time in a learning program, another great use for networking. And then job search. I mean, there's so much we can talk about with job search, but in essence, you're getting your foot in the door. You are going to become a real face to the name instead of just relying on these online applications. And statistically, networking is the top way that people land jobs. So we really can't rely just on the job boards. So you meet somebody, you introduce somebody, you might introduce yourself, you might impress them with your questions. You can actually prove your fit and your knowledge just by way of what you ask. And you kind of get to the top of the pile when you can get an introduction to the team. So those are just a few. I'm sure I could think of more, but those are kind of the obvious goals. I will pause. Yes, I will pause.
I love it. Okay, so I like how you broke this down into the various goals. How do we know personally, like what we should be doing when we are trying to set our own goals? Are there different like areas that are smartest to start at if you are new to the field? Is this a situation where, like, depending on where you are, there's kind of a checklist, or is this something we have to sort of identify for ourselves?
Well, so you want to ask yourself, like, what phase are you in? I usually recommend career path exploration is usually the first step. That could take you a day or a week. If you kind of already know what it is where you want to go next, you might just need a few hours of reflection. Sometimes I'll work with clients where it's a month or 2 or 3. It doesn't have to take you a year. But if you feel you need clarity on where you want to go next, I would start always with just exploring, learning, reflecting, learning from professionals through networking, and making sure you know which direction makes the most sense for you. That's usually a good place to start. Once that's done, the secondary phase might be upskilling. You might want to ask yourself or ask others, do I need or do I want extra skill development in order to pursue this direction? And then, of course, there's job search. Of course, there's personal branding, which is just all of your materials. It doesn't really involve networking. But yeah, and then you would job search. But I would strongly recommend you don't want to just dive into job search until you've at least been, allow yourself to have some space and time and structure and support to say, what's the best next step for me? So career path exploration, upskilling, job search, those are kind of the order, I guess, of the phases that I would say is like the ideal order to go in. But everyone's different, right? If you're not working and you need a job quickly, sure, dive into job search. The easiest way to get a role is to say, okay, what was the last role that I had, and find that somewhere else. So if there's a time crunch, that's okay. And you would just simply optimize for the job search. So it just depends on, like, if you're working and you have time on your side, you might go about it in one way versus if you're not working. So it kind of depends on your timeline. But that's sort of the order I would think about the phases. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, of course. All right, so let's kind of tackle this idea from a different perspective. A lot of people were wondering how to achieve. Oh, there it is. A lot of people were trying to ask about how to achieve networking goals without feeling that mental and physical drain due to being introverts. And I thought this was a really good question because, it's not just the introverts that kind of get drained by this. Like, it can be very draining, even if you are the peopliest people person that ever people. Like it really is one of those things where like it can be a great time and it can also be like, oh God, thank God that's over. What do you recommend for people that are either experiencing that drain or know that this is something they can expect once they try and do that outreach to make those networking connections?
Yes, I actually have a recent blog that I wrote, networking for introverts. So feel free, guys, to check that out. And I'll actually just quickly put this here for you. So give me a second. I have a bunch of free resources, blogs, and videos here. So there is a blog on that. But the quick thoughts that I have is like, if you have time on your side, space it out. Ask yourself, like, what can I handle? You don't need to go overboard necessarily. And even if you're not working, you can get a lot done for job search in just a few hours per day if you know where to spend your time wisely. So if you are working, ask yourself what pace feels good to you. You don't need to burn out over this. So maybe you do one networking call a week. These calls could be 15, 20, 30 minutes. And if one call per week is good for you, that's fine. That's productive and that's great. Ask yourself what amount you can handle, and there's no need to go overboard. I also like to think about it as a process, like for introverts especially. For example, you're gonna read questions, you're gonna draft an email outreach, and then you can actually just prepare those questions on paper to make yourself feel comfortable. And you can do this over the phone. You don't necessarily have to do a video Zoom call, which sometimes is more draining. So I like, sometimes the phone is a bit easier because you can focus. You don't have to worry about your body language. You can actually just look at your notes and you're listening and you're focusing. So I like, the phone, spacing it out, balancing how much to take on, making it a process. If there's any deeper mindset stuff to it, because I think a lot of people have hesitations that are common with networking. So ask yourself if there's like something that's tripping you up deeper about it. Like sometimes people just don't feel comfortable with the idea of asking for help, or they don't want to ask their network. They prefer to ask a stranger, or vice versa, like who you're talking to. Sometimes people worry about like, do I have to show up knowing everything? Which no, you don't. The point is to learn and to ask them questions. So understand if there's anything like deeper that sort of nags at you, and try to have a peer, mentor, coach, someone work through that with you. Because if you can sort of unravel the cobwebs there, you'll be able to show up more comfortably, more confidently, with a little bit more energy, versus if you're distracted by some of those nerves. Those nerves are normal, but I think with a coach, mentor, peer, you can actually work through it in a way that you get more comfortable, right? So that helps you to show up to the process a bit more sort of ready. What else can I say about draining energy? Let's see. Yeah, I mean, just know that it's just learning. They know that we could talk about what you would say in your initial outreach to somebody, but in essence, you're learning from them, and they're only going to say yes if they're a kind person who's, people love to talk about themselves. And if they're willing to have that chat with you, then they're willing to help and they're willing to answer questions. And it's usually relatively easy for someone to just, if you were asking me a question about my job, I would just answer you. So, know that they've already said yes because they're happy to help and you're learning from them. And as long as you have a few prepared questions on paper, you don't need to show up as that expert. So try not to like over stress about, how you show up necessarily. It's not an interview. Try to lean on the side of being authentic and trust the fact that like, you are a professional, you know how to speak with other professionals, right? How do you act in the workplace? You don't have to like put on any other face. It's not an interview, and the thing I always say about networking is this is the way the world goes round. Like, this is how we learn. This is how professional development happens. We meet with each other and we say, oh, can you tell me about your role in your team and your industry? Because I'm considering it. And then they might ask you questions. Or someone else is going to ask you and you're going to ask them, and that person got help from someone else. This is how the professional development world goes round. So it's very normal, very expected, very common, very much okay. People love to learn from each other, right? And they're gaining something by meeting you. You might offer your network to them. You might see how you can help them. You might share insights, resources, and knowledge with them as well. So it's really just a conversation, and try to just like bring yourself back to that. I think we sometimes like over put it in this whole other category, you know? I'll pause. Does that help?
No, this is making tons of sense. And honestly, I feel like a lot of the same questions and the same like reservations or something that people have around networking, they're very similar to what I hear when we host chats on mentorship too, right? People are not at all sure how to do this. They feel like it needs to be a formal process, or it's already too formal, so it needs to be brought back. And it is really, it can feel really tricky, but it's one of those things that we overthink a lot. Neelam had written in asking, how do you make networking not feel like cold calling? And I think you'd started to touch on this, but let's expand. If you are truly reaching out sight unseen to people you do not have, primary, secondary, tertiary connections with, how do you make that feel less like cold calling?
Yeah. What I'm going to actually do is I have an exercise where I actually, go through each of the categories of types of connections. So I'm going to bring that up so I have it in front of me. But essentially, the reason I'm bringing it up is because cold connections are just one type of connection. So the first thing you want to do is try to understand who are the different categories of people at my disposal. I'm going to quickly run through it. Okay. So, the first one is family and friends, right? We shouldn't assume that we know who people know. Even if it's our close friends, they could have a neighbor or a cousin that works in some role or industry that you're thinking about. They never would have shared that with you because you didn't ask, right? And so I know it sounds weird because it's like we know our network, but we don't really know our network's network until we ask that person to like think about it and or search their LinkedIn to see who they may know. Acquaintances, this could be someone, a loose connection. It could be a friend of a friend. It could be literally like a doc. I literally had a chiropractor once introduce me to one of her clients at like a major financial services firm and interviewed there. Literally your doctor. It's fair game. You know what I'm saying? Like anyone let me put it this way. Any human you've ever come across with is fair game. But I'm going to give you more categories to make it more specific. So we've got friends and family, we've got acquaintances, past colleagues. Even if they are not in a role or a team or an industry that is relevant to you, it's the same idea. Their network. What if your past colleague from however many years ago, maybe their partner does something, maybe their cousin does something, maybe their whoever, who knows, right? And introductions are so key. So Neelam, to answer your question, introductions, mutual connections, is really just so powerful. I would always start there and don't assume that you know who your network knows. LinkedIn is also super powerful because if you type something in, you'll see shared connections. So it might show me that Meg is connected with Tommy. I keep using Tommy. And then I could say to Meg, and I'm like, do you actually know that person? Could you introduce us, right? So LinkedIn actually shows you this stuff, but you could also email your network and just say, do you happen to know someone who does A, B, C, or D? Social organizations, if you've ever been a membership association, part of a club, a group, it could be a religious organization, it could be a gym, it could be a wine club, it could be your soccer team, it literally could be anything you do in your personal life. These are people who may know people. Alumni of your university, any school you've ever attended, any boot camp program, mainly undergraduate becomes a very powerful alumni network, but really any alumni network. And on LinkedIn, find your school and it will give you access to search the alumni network, which usually have tens of thousands of people. All of a sudden you have a warm connection. You say, you went to Binghamton, so did I. And then you write a really good note about what it is you want to learn from them. People feel their heartstrings pulled at that point. They feel connected. They feel something in common with you. It makes them feel like you're not a complete stranger, right? And then you can just think about like, who are people in your target roles, industries, and companies, or, again, mutual connections. Do I know somebody who knows somebody in my target directions? And recruiters are kind of sort of last on the list. They are people as well that you can learn from. But again, to me, a cold connection that you have nothing in common with is kind of your last resort. You want to try to find something in common, find a mutual connection, find an introduction, use LinkedIn to your advantage. So that's how I think of it, Nilam, because I think what you're asking, when I hear cold calling, what I hear is I'm reaching out to somebody that I just don't know. And so the type of hot, warm, cold connection to me makes it feel not like cold calling, because you're like, we kind of know each other a little bit. But let me think what else feels like cold. I mean, you feel free to share in the chat what else feels about it like cold calling, because to me, that's what I think you're asking, is like the cold connection. But of course, there's what do you say when you do the outreach? What do you say on the call? Things like that. But yeah, that's how I would avoid that cold calling feeling.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to highlight what you said about, people like to talk about themselves. They like to talk about things they know. And it can feel like you're kind of coming in and just like asking for something out of nowhere, but you're not asking for something that is in any way, or at least generally, unpleasant for people to do. People like to feel like they can help someone, especially if it's something that is a pretty easy lift on them. And Katrina is also typing in here saying, when I cold call messages, I feel less stressed because I don't have to see their faces. This 100%. You don't have to feel like, granted, there's a lot of like generational stereotypes here, but like I will absolutely jump on the phone. I know a bunch of my friends who are just, it's anathema to them to make a phone call. I will absolutely do it, because who knows? Like,
I wouldn't necessarily just like
call. Oh, no, not for cold. Sorry. I'm talking like when you need to know something from like a current connection, or like, hey, I see you're connected to blah, blah, blah. I've got no problem jumping on a phone call of like, yeah, that's, you might know something. But you're right, it does, doing this in digitally does take a lot of the kind of pressure out of it to like know what you're going to say at the time, or you get to kind of go through a couple drafts. I think that's wonderful. We actually do have a lot of people asking about like, how do you take the first step? How do you initiate the conversation? Is there a script we should use? Do you have any information that you'd like to share for that?
Yeah. And so you said one thing about how like sometimes it feels out of the blue. To avoid it feeling like out of the blue, in your outreach, you can give context. However, if you're in job search mode, I personally don't like to mention job search in your email. If you're emailing like a recruiter about an open role, then sure, you can mention that. But if you're just learning from somebody who's like in the role or in the team that you want to be on, I would focus your outreach on learning, because that is what it is. If you're in job search mode, once you're on the phone at the end of the call, that's when you can uncover if they have any openings on their team or something like that. But in essence, whether they have an opening or not, you're learning, and you may see who else they can introduce you to, even if they don't have an open role. And so give context of what you want to learn about from that person. You can tell them that you're exploring. You can tell them that you're learning more about A, B, C, and D, and that you'd love to learn from them. So I think you can give some context as to the goal and what you're reaching out about, why you're reaching out, what you'd hope to learn. If you're specific and clear and authentic with that, it's really going to resonate and make for a more effective outreach. So it won't feel as out of the blue. You can sort of explain the phase you're in, what you're working on. And also they'll respect it if you say like you're in a phase of doing exploration or whatever it may be, because people really will look at that and say, oh, you're doing your due diligence. Like, I really do respect that and I want to help you. In terms of scripts, I don't ever necessarily like give a script per se. Like I could tell you like what are the main things I think you should incorporate into like an email outreach, as well as I do have a list of example networking questions. But the first thing I always say to any client is like, given your initial research so far, what are your actual questions about the role, about the team, about the company, about the department, about the industry? What are your actual questions? I could give you some prompts as to like the categories to think about. And I do give some example phrasings. But I don't really want anyone to feel like it's such a script per se. That being said, on the flip side, you can create an email template and say, these are the best practices of how I feel comfortable to effectively phrase that outreach. And then you customize or tweak it with each person. So there's a way of incorporating the best practices and relying on them, but also feel like with each outreach, you're making sure it still makes sense, or you're adjusting it however you need. I do give example phrasing of the questions to ask on the call. And the reason for that is just because a lot of times people just don't know what to ask. And people will say, like, just ask about that person's journey. I like to ask more. I don't like to necessarily just learn about their path or their opinion. I like to get facts and I like to get patterns. So that's why I like to give examples, but I don't think anyone needs to feel like they need a script. What you need though is just preparation. So sit there for 10 minutes and just say, what are the 10 questions I want to ask? And just be thoughtful. And you'd be surprised if you sit for 5 or 10 minutes, like you're going to phrase out. And ironically, the phrasing, taking the time to really phrase the question actually is half the battle, because you need to actually sort through in your head, what do I really need to know here? So don't just jump on the call, try to sit with it and really figure out like what you're trying to ask so that you can be as clear to get the information out that you need. But I don't like scripts. I like preparation. I like templates. I like best practices, and then adjust accordingly.
I love that. We did have a lot of people that are like really would prefer a script or template. So I did pull up a previous chat where we had a couple people that shared things like this, that shared templates. It's mostly for like, not only for introductions or for networking purposes, but it also kind of tells you like, if what you're trying to get is this, here's how you should phrase it. So absolutely check out that link, y'all. There are some great templates there. And like, generally speaking, no one's going to know if you sent the same like template to multiple people, especially if you're trying to like find out a specific set of, like, how does this work at your company? And you send it to a couple different people, it's fine. They're not going to compare notes. It's like when you write thank you notes, it's okay. Like nobody's going to be like, well, what did she write in yours? Like, it's just not a thing. So it's okay. Don't reinvent the wheel every time.
Right. I agree. I would say just read through it. Like, have your templates, read through it, knowing who you're reaching out to. And if there is a quick way to customize or add whatever specifics based on that person, it doesn't hurt. But yeah, it's totally okay to have at least, like, again, I like templates because it's like you have your baseline, like 90% of the work is ready, and it makes you feel like I can do this a little more quickly and easily. And then there's like little spots you could quickly add something if you need to, but don't overthink the outreach. And if you're not sure, get another pair of eyes, get perspective, coach, mentor, peer, whoever it may be. For somebody who might naturally be an overthinker, if you're like taking so much time on the emails, just get another pair of eyes on it. And I find that usually helps you to feel like, okay, it's good enough to send, right? If you're stalling, if you're procrastinating, if you're not sure, get some help to make sure, you can feel better sending it out.
Yes, of course. We had a couple of really good questions coming in the chat, y'all. So I'm going to keep us moving. We have about a little less than 30 minutes left. So if you've got questions, make sure you ask them. I am grabbing every single question that comes in the chat. So hopefully we can get to as many of them as possible. We did have one more question that people wanted to know if you have any, books, websites, podcasts, any resources around this topic that you find helpful, either for you to kind of stay up on industry trends, or for people who might be completely new to the workforce, have never had to network before. Do you have any resources that you recommend for people?
Yeah. Well, it depends, right? There's resources that are just to learn about like your target roles and your target industries. And those are going to be specific to whatever your path is. And again, with networking, I really love asking that question to the professionals. If somebody's working in the role or in the industry that you want to be in, getting that question from them or asking that question to them is great, because they're in the role already and they're probably using those resources potentially on a day-to-day basis. So if you can ask that, and that's for the work. If you're thinking about just career development resources, of course, we've got Power to Fly, we've got Woken. I like Slack groups a lot. I find that there's like a lot of Slack groups out there for different communities, whether it's for your industry or just career development. Finding like a community. Slack is basically just like a chat, but there are some that can be really active as a place to meet people, share resources. And so that can be helpful. What else can I say? I mean, LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is your number one tool. If you're new to the workforce or not even new to it, but if you're like, where do I go? I personally think it's just really, really powerful. Of course, there's a news feed, there's your profile where people can, you can get inbound leads based on if you've optimized your profile towards the direction you want to go in. But it's a research tool. It's to me the most powerful because you can pretty much see like almost every person and sort of like where they work. So if you want to know who works at this company or who's a shared connection or what's their role title or what do they do or all these types of things, there's so much good research that you can do, alumni network, things like that. So LinkedIn to me is super, super, super powerful. And then, yeah, I think finding your own industry groups. Like I used to, back in the day, and I still do this, but like find like email lists that you can actually just subscribe to if they're relevant to your field. And that way it's just coming to you. And then you could join webinars, you can join networking events, you can join things that are relevant because you found the organization or the association that's most relevant to what it is you want to learn about. And of course, follow on social media and you'll see if and when they do events and things like that. But yeah, really asking those professionals directly, like, what do you use on a day-to-day basis? What are the resources you have used at work to help you with literally your job? I think is the number one tool. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything here. Those are the things that come to mind with resources, I think.
Okay.
And yeah, just coaching too. Mentor, peer, coach, accountability groups, and or coaching. Like if you literally have a person who's there customized to you, like what's your goal, what's your challenge, that's what they're there for, is to just simply help you along with all of this.
Yeah, of course. All right. When we're talking about doing this networking, should we be like kind of focusing on people within our current industry, or is it better to have people across several industries, even if you don't ever plan on leaving the area where where you work?
Yeah. So I would think about your personal network is probably inherently broad. And so that's where you get the variety. I think if you're going to go seek out some connections, the obvious thing is to seek out connections who are in the roles, companies, and industries that you're interested in. I think that's the first line of defense. It's like the quickest win, right? Because you want the most relevant relationships, the relevant knowledge, relevant, resources and relationships. I don't know if it like makes sense to just say like, oh, let's proactively like meet someone in another industry randomly just because it's another industry if you'll never want to work in that. What I would say instead is notice networking opportunities when they arise. So for example, it's okay to build a relationship and spark up a conversation if you so happen to be at some event, party, or wherever, even if that person's not related, relevant to your field, right? So be open to meeting any and all people, but if you're going to like sort of sit there and research and do the outreach and want to set up these informational calls, I think reaching out to people who are doing all the different kinds, there could be variety within your direction of the different types of roles, teams, projects, companies, even subsectors within an industry. So I think you can still have variety within the realm of what you want to learn, because sometimes people have like a career mission, like for example, education. It's like there's a lot of teachers and then they're like, I really care about education, but maybe there's another setting or avenue where I could deliver on this mission of supporting the education of whoever it may be through different lenses. Maybe it's through some ed tech product, or maybe it's through a public, it could be a nonprofit, or it could be this. Maybe it doesn't have to be a school setting. And so thinking about the variety within your world is probably already a challenge enough to create the variety. But I don't think you need to just like say, let me go out of look, diversity in your network never hurts. Like if you want to give yourself a goal to say, I want to meet someone new who does something totally different once a month, just for the sake of it, I'll never tell you not to do that. You know what I'm saying? Like it's great. It's amazing because, but it's more so noticing when it comes to you. If you so happen to strike up a conversation or somebody wants to introduce you to somebody, like to me, I've always been like a proactive networker. You might not know in the moment why that person's going to be helpful to you, but if you so happen to be introduced, say yes. If somebody's like, you should really talk to this person, and people say that to me all the time, and I'm like, okay, and I meet them. and I make that time for it, even though I don't know where it may lead. That's the proactive building of your network, right? It's a dicey one because yeah, like diversity is good, but like I don't think you need to like be like, oh, this industry is like so unless you have a personal goal where you're just like,
it's not like Pokemon, right? You don't need to collect one of each. Like it's like, pardon the horribly nerdy like reference, but like, you know, it's one of those things where like, if you think it might be useful, yeah, if it's going to be something that's going to like kind of recharge your batteries a little bit, right. Yeah, absolutely. But you know, you don't need to having the biggest network is not necessarily having the most useful network, right?
Right. You do want it to be quality and some level of quantity, but yes, quality is key. If you had some hobbies or interests or just a personal goal to meet diverse people in different jobs, which is not a bad thing, do it. But if you're like, I've got a time crunch and I've got a career goal and I want to be focused, you want to meet as many people who are doing the work that you want to do, right? Because you're going to learn so much even within your target field, right? You want to challenge yourself to learn more than you already do about the work you're actually interested in, because that is what's going to push your career. Like, you know, with any given role or industry, there's variety and there's different angles and there's different avenues and there's different perspectives. So even understanding the variety within your field to me is like a good challenge enough to focus on, so that you show up to the interviews showing that you understand all 10 perspectives in this industry. And that in and of itself is, you know, a lot, you know, so.
Yeah, of course. All right. So once you have established, actually, I'm going to take these next two questions a little bit out of order. When you had talked about preparing, right, and being prepared for an informational call, are there steps that you would highlight or say, like, do not skip this part of preparation? Like, what do you think makes for a good base of like preparation before an informational call with someone?
Yes. I'm actually going to pull something up again because I have this written out, but number one is you're going to review if you've done any prior research, right? So if you took notes, if you jotted down questions, if you had done some research generally on those roles or industries, pull up your own notes if you've already done that precursor work. That's number one. Again, I do have suggested questions. So if you have any resources with suggested questions, obviously you can reference that as some ideas and inspiration for what to ask. Again, my guidance is to reference another one of my own materials, could reference the categories to think about, right? Which is the person's role, the person's team, the person's company, the person's department, the person's industry, as well as the recruiting and sort of how to break into the path. Those are some of the broad categories if you had to just think about. And then of course you can look at their LinkedIn profile, you can look at their background, and you want to look at the company website. Those are the bare bones that I would say. And of course, just reflecting on your own questions. Your authentic questions are like the number one thing here. Take 20 minutes, review those things, and list out your questions in priority order. So I think if you have 5-10 questions ready, I mean, for a 20-30 minute call, I think having 10 questions is probably more than enough. It's an art and a balance where you want to be in the moment. So if they say something, you can actually just double down and ask more about it. But you also have your list ready just in case you need to refer to it. So yeah, that's kind of how I would prepare for this pretty much. I mean, again, I referenced the research. I typically would guide somebody to like, just do their own self-research. Again, you don't have to be an expert, but like, even if it's 10, 15, 20 minutes, like Googling just the role or the industry, you don't want to show up like, I've never even heard of this thing. So just like get your own wheels turning, get your feet wet, but you do not need to be an expert. That's not the goal of the call, is to learn from them. So you just want to have enough research where it's sparking some questions from you. And of course, you know, get some references so you have even some suggested questions. Between all of that, 20 minutes, you're good to go. Personally, I just think having the questions in front of you is more than enough. You'll come across as prepared and thoughtful and, you know, ready to use their time wisely and thus respectful, right? So yeah, I don't think you need to go crazy. 20 minutes will do a lot. If you have an hour, sure, but you don't need more than that. You really don't.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with you. For stuff like this, which is practically an informational call, like I get to talk to people about things that I do not really have personal experience about. We prep 13 questions to fill an hour. We maybe get to, I'd say 9 on average. And that's because like I talk a whole lot. But truly, like if you're only trying to fill 20 to 30 minutes and you prep 10 questions, you're probably good. You
Yeah.
probably will not need all 10. Like, yeah, don't prep 5 and then kind of worry like if you don't have anything else to talk about. But I mean, you can always follow up with something like let's say you do run out of questions, you can always come up with something like what is a question you thought I was going to ask? What is something that is really important to know about this industry or this career move that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, I love that. Or you just say, yeah, what haven't I asked? Or what
Yeah.
should I? You can literally say, what should I ask? Yeah, that's
what
great.
should I be asking now? Is there something like what direction should I be thinking? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people then wanted to talk about once you've made that initial connection and you've spoken to this person once, how do you keep that relationship going? Because I feel like a lot of times, especially when it comes to mentorship, we talk about, how to maintain this. What does that look like in terms of networking?
Yes. So that's a good question. So it depends. If you're in job search mode and you have a good connection and a good call and a good relationship with somebody, I think every 4 to 8 weeks, you could reconnect. If somebody was in a role, in a team, in a company that was interesting, but didn't have any openings, and that's your goal and that's what you're searching for, you can reach out and say, like, I'd love to give you some updates on what I've been working on and hear any updates that you have. You need to make sure the goal of the follow-up is also clear to use their time wisely again, because you did already get their time. So try to come up with some brief agenda, give them updates, ask them for updates. Maybe you have additional questions. Maybe you have a little mini project to share with them. Maybe you have whatever it may be. I think you can reconnect, every few weeks with people like that, because a lot of things change quickly in the workplace. And so they may have an opening. And I know people always say, oh, I'll look out or I'll keep you in mind. People are too busy to kind of do that. So you need to stay on their radar and stay warm. And you just want to leave enough time where it warrants like a good update. But if you've been working with job search and you've been researching and learning and maybe doing some skill development, it might warrant another call. You might, if you think about it this way, say in one call, your second call in 2 months from now, if you've been doing the work for 2 months, you probably have more questions, potentially more specific, right? You're getting deeper. And so you might have a whole other set of questions, and it allows you to reconnect and maybe re-explore whether they have any other opportunities that they can think of. If it's just simply for like mentorship, that's up to you. Mentors, you can have like somebody you meet with like once a month. You could have somebody you meet with once a quarter. If it's a really senior person, maybe you ask them to meet twice a year or once a year if it's really senior. So it depends on your goal. And I mean, personally, with the amount that I have networked, I don't think you need to expect yourself to stay in touch with like everyone. I would say it's good to stay organized, have a spreadsheet or whatever it may be, so that you can refer to it in the future if you need to, but you don't need to necessarily stay in touch with every single person. I would say maybe every 6 months to 12 months, you might want to look back and just reference it and say, is there somebody I should reconnect with? Because, they were so helpful. They're in an interesting field. I should just stay in touch and keep that relationship going. Trying to think what else. Sending them like updates, right? Maybe you've written a blog, maybe you've done some project, maybe you've updated your portfolio, maybe you've learned something, maybe you've reflected and you're going in a new direction, maybe any number of changes, updates could warrant a conversation as well as more questions. So you want to pick and choose who's sort of worth sort of doing that with. You don't need to like keep up with every single person, but just as long as you're organized. Because if for whatever reason say you land an interview with somebody, a company, and you had spoken with somebody, you want to just be able to reference it. And then I would cherry pick the few that you want to sort of stay in touch with. And if it's somebody that you really want to meet with on a regular basis, like if you really feel like they're a mentor in the sense that like they've done everything you want to be doing and you really want to learn from them, you can kindly ask for maybe like see what they're willing to do and see what cadence you think would be good. Once a month, once a quarter, once every 2 months. You can make up a cadence once every 6 weeks. And just go in with an agenda. If you are going to do a regular mentor type meeting, like as long as you're prepared, using their time wisely, learning from them, they'll probably feel the same way and feel good that they're helped. Mentors want to do that as well, right? Like they want to help. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. We have less than 10 minutes. I want to try and make sure we get to one more question at least. We might be able to get to two. One person had asked, what tips can you give for networking during virtual conferences or events like this one? And I think this is a great question, because we encourage y'all to network with each other and get to know each other on chats like this. We definitely encourage it during our virtual job fairs, during our summits every month. What do you think, in your opinion, what do you think is the best way to go about networking when you are in a virtual setting?
Yeah. If you're in like a webinar or like workshop or something like this, I mean, sometimes these events have a specific like moment for networking, in which case go for it. If it's more just like this, and I know we do this sometimes in the chat and learns, like you guys feel free right now if you want to share your LinkedIn link and you can connect with each other. And of course you want to look at the speakers. If there's a speaker or a panelist working in or presenting on behalf of some company that you're interested in, connect with them, and connect with the participants, right? Because if these participants are also potentially either in your field of interest or looking into it, you guys can share learning, share resources, introduce each other to different people. So pop your LinkedIn link in the chat and connect with each other. I'm trying to think, it's okay to sort of add some context as to like what you do. But I would just challenge you guys, like, even if it doesn't seem obvious, pick somebody from this audience today and like chat and say like, here's who I'm trying to meet. Here's who I'm trying to meet. Do you happen to know anyone? They don't have to obviously, be in the obvious field necessarily that you're looking into, share, because you guys are here because you're interested in the community, career development, some level of support, and that give and take. And so I would challenge you guys to be open about who you meet and just see how you can help each other, even if it's not obvious, right? But at the very least, connect on LinkedIn, because now you'll remember them. And if you see they have a shared connection, that's another way to do it. You can, search, and see if they're connected with anyone as well.
Oof, love that. I'm also sharing a link in the chat here. I see we've got people that are already starting to fill in and send in their LinkedIn info. That's awesome. We also have a community space for Power to Fly. It's totally free. It kind of, if you're a dinosaur like me, it works basically like AOL chat rooms used to. And so you can come in there, connect with other community members, but I also am there and I go in and I respond to people's questions. So if you've got questions and you're looking for resources on Power to Fly, absolutely, take advantage of that. But you can also just come here for networking. You can just come and try and connect with other people who are interested in the things you are. We have an ask and offer channel that we're starting next week. So that would be a really good place if you are trying to network. You can say like, hey, I need help with blah, 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 but I am skilled in this area. And so maybe we can do a barter for services, or I wanted to talk about blah, 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 and I can tell you more about my industry. Please, y'all take advantage of these things. Let's see. We had a couple other questions that came in. Are there any that were left that you wanted to touch on specifically, or any areas we haven't talked about?
Oh, that's a good question.
I know. There's people that asked about like the difference between mentorship and networking. People who are networking strictly as entry-level job seekers. Mistakes when running an informational call. Anything like this ring a bell? Oh, we did have a question from Rona that was good. Rona had asked if this exercise, so, kind of going through, that was asked when we were talking about different types of networking. Can it be applied to creating an ecosystem? And I was kind of intrigued by this question because it sounds like what you're trying to do is create your network ecosystem, maybe. But Rona, if you're still here, please feel free to give us insight on that question. I don't know, Rachel, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we wrapped today?
In terms of the ecosystem, I think it's a good way of thinking about it. And what's funny about that is actually when I was designing our software platform, I was picturing us doing like almost like this little web, right? Like I would think about your network as this web because you've got different categories. And then it's like, who are they connected to? So yes, there's a way you can be sort of visual about what that system might look like. And maybe it's like, okay, your network's that first ring, your network's network. There's different ways of being creative with this. Yeah, and I think, look, an ecosystem, it's just simply full of a diverse group of participants in that ecosystem. And that's what this is. We humans, we are part of our own ecosystem. And so I think it's a good way of looking at it. Mentorship versus networking. I think the only difference between that is mentorship is typically something you might do on a regular basis. You could just say, I'd love to meet with you as a mentor and have a one-time call, but sometimes it refers to like meeting on a regular basis. And that way they're really sort of building the relationship with you and almost advising you. And it's somebody who's typically in a few levels above you, and they've paved the path that you want to pave, and you're learning from them, and they're giving you a lot of guidance about what to be doing, in order to continue growing in that path. Whereas networking typically, in my experience, refers to like a one-time call. You might reconnect with them 2 or 3 times down the road, but it's usually an informational, learning-based meeting, so to speak. That's kind of sort of how I think about the difference between those two. Mistakes, I don't really know if there's too many mistakes. I think personally, I don't like to mention job search in my outreach. If that's your goal, like people get uncomfortable with job search if they can't help you. So just focus on learning, because even if they do or do not have an open role, either way, you can learn from them, right? And like, what can you learn to help your job search? So just focus on learning. And yeah, I would say mistakes, we did talk about templates. Try to not just cookie cutter, copy and paste, like use your template, but take 5 minutes to make it customized and authentic to them so they know it's worthwhile to really help you. In your outreach, be authentic, be clear, be specific, be prepared, use their time wisely. If you do that, you should be good to go. Don't overthink it. Be yourself. Whatever questions you actually have, that's what networking is here, is to get you those answers. That information is going to drive your clarity and your progress. So that's what it's here for, right? So try not to overthink it.
Love this. Okay. We are just about at the end of time today, but Rachel, I just want to say quick thank you. It's always a pleasure getting to speak with you and getting to work with you. And I learn something new every time we talk. So I just want to say a huge thank you for taking the time out of your day to spend with us. It's just lovely. Thank you so much for that. And then a huge thank you, obviously, it goes out to our community members, everybody that attended today. Thank you so much. Being so active in the chat, as well as asking questions and networking with each other. It just makes these events so much more dynamic. I don't know about you, I personally enjoy them a lot more when I can see y'all really getting something out of the material. So thank you so much for taking time to spend with us, for bringing such great questions. Really hoping to see many more of you on chats going forward, as well as in our community space too, y'all. We would love to see you. Now, don't forget, Rachel did put links into the chat for where you can schedule a free initial call with her. So please take advantage of all of those great resources. And that's going to wrap us up for Friday. So I hope that if this was your first Power to Fly event, I hope that you'll be back soon to see us again. If you are a frequent flyer with us and we see you all the time, thank you so much for joining. I love getting to see all of our familiar faces. Have a safe, happy, healthy weekend, and can't wait to see you back here later. Bye, everybody.